though, on the basis of, as I understand it, medical evidence to suggest that the impact of the behaviours were such that this complainant may struggle to work ever again. Now, that may well be the case. I can't help but think that that's a matter that's going to be pretty intensely tested by IBM's lawyers if the matter goes to court.
Indeed, as it arguably was in David Jones's case.
We'd never really got to be tested because of when the settlement...
and so we will arguably never know that. Tell me, though, about, by excluding it, how that almost gets off scot-free, or the perception around the boardroom table is less, I suppose, salutary there, therefore, at that point, because they're not being, as a company, singled out. Then, at the moment, in IBM's case, still comes down to one individual. Do you think that's creating a climate of complacency?
I do think, whether it's a climate of complacency or a failure by boards and leadership groups to properly appreciate that these things can happen and do happen within their own organisation. The mistake I think that senior executives are making at the moment is they compartmentalise these cases and really do apply this approach of, well, that is not the kind of behaviour that happens in this organisation. And what I challenge them to properly appreciate is that those behaviours, if not identical, very similar behaviours, and comparable in terms of how they'll be judged in the public eye, are occurring within their organisation. It's just that the person who is the victim, to use a terrible phrase, is not making an issue about it at this point in time.
Is that a generational denial, you suspect? So the longer the older guard sort of holds sway, there will be that, well, it's not happening on our turf. It's someone else's problem. But that's beginning to change. We've seen even this year key personnel around boardrooms hanging up their ties and all the rest of it. Do you think that will usher in a new environment?
Look, I would certainly hope so. I think that leaders who have come through a generation of a lot more compliance training in their formative years in the workforce will have a greater appreciation. Certainly those coming from a US background, from a corporate point of view, will have a better appreciation of these kinds of matters than those coming perhaps from a European background.
Would you also be liking to see, because it did throw into stark relief with the David Jones case, and arguably with this one now with IBM, the elevated role of HR, another awful phrase, human resources. But the fact that with David Jones you had a chairman arguably left out to dry, he was left hanging, was he not? Facing a barrage of reporters' questions without the support of HR alongside. Does that have to change? Do we need to be flagging the fact that they stand together as one?
I think the challenge will, perception-wise, from a board point of view, rest with HR to make sure that the house is in order. But in my experience, there's a lot of very, very competent senior HR practitioners and leaders who are trying to drive this but aren't getting the necessary buy-in. By the same token, there are a lot of HR practitioners who are perhaps not driving this as intensely as they should. And I guess the critical catch point for senior executives and board members should be that you can be personally liable, and that's one of the features of the DJ's case that's been overlooked, was that board members were personally litigated against in that case. So that's a real risk, and if that doesn't get the attention of senior leaders within the organisation, then perhaps nothing will.
And you don't think that by codifying more strictly the role of HR in these situations, i.e. to be that policing mechanism, not simply a response mechanism, if you do codify it, you would then remove the ability to target board members, because they could rightly say, our systems state quite clearly that is a function and that is a role that has to be met and served by HR, not us.
I think that it may be dangerous for them to be seen to be hiding behind any function within the organisation, but I don't think that establishing those mechanisms, documenting those mechanisms and showing appropriate buy-in, and indeed showing that the board members and the leaders themselves are complying in the appropriate way, can do anything other than assist those organisations to properly manage their risk.
As you say, so many of these issues and cases settle out of court, but when we do get one where companies are big out in the wider economy. We certainly take up sort of a lot more interest in them. This one will develop. Joydeep, come back and shed more light as we get more information, won't you? Indeed, stay with us. Joydeep will stay with us from People and Culture Strategies, because we'll take a break. But when we come back, we're going to delve more deeply into paid parental leave rules. There are new requirements coming into play, and Alison Baker from Hall & Wilcox will be joining us, and Joydeep as well, to discuss those imminent changes. Stay with us.